Have you ever lived somewhere that felt wrong? Not haunted in the obvious sense. No shadows, no slamming doors, just a silence that presses in too close. Tonight's story is about a house like that, one where the walls themselves were listening. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video with someone who loves a good scare. And in the comments, let me know where you're watching from. I'll be watching the comments too. Now, let's begin. I never planned on moving back to my hometown. After my parents passed, the thought of returning to Hollow Creek made my chest tighten with an unease I couldn't explain. Still, when the lawyer called about an unclaimed property in my family's name, curiosity tugged harder than dread. The house wasn't in the town proper. It sat alone, down an unpaved road, swallowed by crooked trees that leaned toward it as if whispering secrets. The strangest thing, I didn't remember my parents ever mentioning owning another home. When I pulled up in my car that first evening, the air felt heavier. The house was 2 stories, gray paint peeling, windows dark as blind eyes, the kind of place kids dared each other to touch and run away from. The lawyer's words echoed in my mind. The house was never sold. It's been sitting for decades. Strangely, no record of who lived there before your parents. Just there. I should have turned around, but instead, I stepped inside. The door didn't creak. It sighed, as though relieved someone had finally opened it. Dust clung to the air, swirling in the beam of my flashlight. The floorboards dipped slightly with each step, groaning under a weight they hadn't carried in years. The oddest part, the house wasn't empty. Furniture stood exactly where you'd expect, couches draped in white sheets, a grandfather clock frozen at 3:07, picture frames turned face down. I picked one up. The glass was cracked, but there was no photo inside, just a blank yellowed square. That should have been enough to leave. But curiosity is its own trap. I explored deeper. Each room carried the same strange absence. Everything was here, but none of it felt lived in. Like a stage set, waiting for actors that never came. It was when I reached the upstairs hallway that I noticed it. A hum, low, barely perceptible at first, like the vibration of a refrigerator motor. But there was no power running. No electricity. I froze, pressing my ear against the wall. The hum wasn't mechanical. It was layered, textured, almost like voices, whispers. I laughed nervously at myself, stepping back. It was probably wind slipping through old beams. That's what I told myself, as I set down my bag in what looked like the master bedroom. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of the whispers, though they lingered, threading faintly through the walls, but because of the way the house seemed to wait. It wasn't the silence of abandonment. It was the silence of anticipation. The next morning I checked the walls again. They were solid, plastered, thick, no cracks big enough for wind to pass through. Still, when I pressed my palm flat against the wallpaper, I felt something subtle, a vibration, steady as a heartbeat. And sometimes, if I lingered long enough, the whispers sharpened, tiny syllables threading into words. Not clear, not yet, but I swore I heard my name. That day I drove back into town, asking questions. The locals shifted uncomfortably when I mentioned the house on Old Quarry Road. Most just muttered, "Don't go up there." One old man at the diner leaned in closer, eyes watery but sharp. "That house, it doesn't like to be alone. You'll see, it'll keep you." I asked him what he meant, but he only shook his head, muttering into his coffee. Back at the house, I tried to shake it off. The walls were just old wood, the whispers just the tricks of a lonely mind. That's what I told myself. But that night, things changed. I woke around 3 a.m., the exact time frozen on the grandfather clock downstairs. My throat was dry. When I swung my legs over the bed to still, I froze. The hum was louder, not just in the walls above me, in the ceiling. I tilted my head up, and I swear, I heard breathing. Slow, patient, right above me. That breathing above me, it was deliberate, measured, like someone was lying flat across the beams of the attic, waiting for me to notice. I held my breath, straining to hear, and as I did, the sound changed. It wasn't breathing anymore, it was mimicking mine. Every inhale, every exhale, perfectly in sync, as though the ceiling itself were wearing my lungs. I sat frozen on the bed until my chest ached. Finally, I whispered into the dark. "Who's there?" Silence. Then from the wall just to my right, barely above a murmur, came a reply. "You are." My blood turned to ice. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I sat up, flashlight clutched in my hand, staring at the ceiling until dawn bled through the shutters. The next morning, exhaustion weighed on me, but I had to know. I dragged the old ladder from the shed out back and climbed into the attic. It was low and cramped, beams thick with cobwebs. My light swept across forgotten boxes, yellowed newspapers, a child's broken rocking horse. Nothing that could account for what I'd heard. But then I noticed something strange. The far wall wasn't aligned with the roofline. It jutted inward, cutting the space short by several feet. A false wall. At first glance, there was no way in. No hatch, no doorway. But when I pressed my palm flat against the wood, that vibration thrummed against my skin again. And behind it, faint but undeniable, the whispers. I stumbled back, nearly toppling off the ladder. My heart hammered so loud it drowned out everything else. There was a room behind the walls. I tried to distract myself that day. Made coffee, paced the kitchen, tried reading through some of the old newspapers I'd dragged down from the attic. The articles were banal: grocery store openings, weather reports, town meetings. But then tucked between the pages, I found something odd. A single clipping, yellowed and brittle. No date at the top. It read, "Local family vanishes without trace. House left untouched." The article was short, vague. A man, his wife, and their 2 children. No struggle, no evidence. Just gone. The house remained eerily intact, the writer noted. The address, Old Quarry Road. My house. I dropped the clipping onto the counter like it had burned me. That night, I locked every door, every window. It didn't matter. The whispers started earlier, not at 3 a.m., but closer to midnight. This time, they weren't just faint murmurs. They pressed harder through the walls, threading together into broken phrases. "Not yours. Stay. The others wait." I buried my head under the pillow, trembling. But you can't block out a sound that isn't exactly a sound. It wasn't hitting my ears. It was inside my skull. And then the mattress shifted. Just slightly. Enough for the weight of the bed to dip, as though someone had lowered themselves onto it. I couldn't breathe. My flashlight lay just out of reach. Slowly, carefully, I turned my head. The indentation on the mattress was right beside me, pressing downward, invisible but undeniable. And then, just as sudden, it was gone. The whispers faded back into silence. But I didn't sleep. Not a second. The following morning, delirious from lack of rest, I decided something reckless. If the house wanted to scare me out, it had picked the wrong person. I grabbed a hammer from the shed, climbed back into the attic, and started pounding at that false wall. Dust rained down, the old boards splintering with each strike. The vibrations beneath my hand grew stronger, angrier, like the pulse of some buried thing. Finally, the wood cracked open enough for me to squeeze through. The air inside the hidden room was different. Stale, yes, but warmer, as though it had been occupied more recently than the rest of the attic. And it wasn't empty. A single chair sat in the center. Beside it, a small table. On the table, a notebook, leather-bound, its cover warped with age. I picked it up with trembling hands. The handwriting inside was frantic. Words cramped, sentences spiraling into margins. The first entry chilled me immediately. The walls whisper at night. They know my name. Page after page described the same experiences I was having. Breathing that mimicked. Whispers that grew sharper. The sense of being watched from just beyond the plaster. Then the entries grew darker. They want me to stay. They say leaving isn't allowed. The children are gone. They went into the walls. My wife doesn't remember her name anymore. Only the whispers. The final entry stopped me cold. If you're reading this, it's already too late. The house has chosen you. You won't leave. None of us ever do. My fingers went numb, the book slipping from my grasp. That's when I heard it. A laugh, soft, childlike, right behind me. But when I spun around, the room was empty. I scrambled out of the false chamber, heart battering my ribs. The notebook lay where I dropped it, its pages splayed open like a wound. I should have left, burned the place down, driven until the gas tank ran dry, but I didn't, because when I stumbled downstairs, there, on the kitchen counter, where I was certain I'd left the single newspaper clipping, now sat a small stack, neat, ordered, waiting, and the top one wasn't old, it was new. The headline, "Local outsider reported missing after returning to family property." There was a photo beneath, grainy, black and white, but clear enough, it was me. I stared at the newspaper clipping, my own face staring back at me. The caption beneath the photo read, "Last seen near the property on Old Quarry Road." My hands trembled. The date printed at the top was today's impossible. I stumbled backward, my pulse hammering in my ears. The stack of papers slid off the counter with a papery sigh, scattering across the floor. Every page, every headline was the same story. My disappearance, written again and again, each one slightly different. One version claimed I'd drowned in the creek behind the property. Another said my car was found abandoned on the road. Another still cause of death undetermined. I bolted for the front door. The knob turned, but the door wouldn't budge. Not locked, just fixed, like the wood had fused into the frame. I tried the windows, nailed shut, every one of them. My breathing came fast, panicked. The whispers rose in response, swelling louder, overlapping, curling into a chorus that pressed against my skull. "Stay, it's already written. No one leaves." I grabbed a chair and hurled it at the nearest window. The glass cracked, but instead of shattering outward, it seemed to fold inward, rippling like water. The chair sank through without a sound. And then, impossibly, it slid back out, sitting neatly on the floor, where I had stood seconds before. My knees buckled. I don't remember how long I sat there, shaking, maybe minutes, maybe hours, but when I finally lifted my head, something had changed. The hallway stretched longer than I remembered. The far wall seemed to pull back, deeper and deeper, until the end of the corridor was swallowed in shadow. I stood slowly. The air felt thicker, syrupy, each breath dragging like wet cloth through my throat. I took a step forward. The floor groaned, not the natural creak of wood, but a low pained moan, as if the house itself resented my weight. Every door I passed was slightly ajar. I knew they hadn't been that way before. The rooms beyond looked wrong. One door opened to a space that was impossibly wide, stretching into darkness like an endless warehouse. Another revealed a room identical to the kitchen, but empty, stripped bare, counters dusted in gray ash. Another door swung inward to nothing but blackness, a void that seemed to breathe. The whispers guided me deeper, every syllable tugging at my ribs. Almost there, room behind room. We've been waiting. I wanted to turn back, but the hallway was no longer behind me, just a wall, smooth and seamless. The house was folding itself around me. Finally, I reached the end. A single door stood there, heavier than the rest. Its wood was dark, pulsing faintly, like something alive beating beneath it. The handle was cold under my fingers. The whispers grew fevered, urgent, open, see, become. My hand trembled, but I turned the knob. The door swung open, and I was staring into a room I recognized. My bedroom. Not here, not in Hollow Creek, but the bedroom from the apartment I'd left behind in the city. The same unmade bed, the same laundry pile slouched in the corner, the same half-empty coffee mug on the desk, except it wasn't empty. Someone was sitting on the bed. At first I thought it was a mirror, my own reflection, but then it lifted its head, slowly, deliberately, and it smiled. "Took you long enough," it said, in my voice. I staggered back, slamming the door shut, but the whispers poured through the wood, swelling into a storm. My ears rang, my vision blurred. I clutched my head, sinking to my knees. I could feel the house pressing inward, walls bending like lungs inhaling, the floor tilting as though it were breathing beneath me. The truth struck me with the weight of stone. This wasn't just a house, it was alive, and it didn't collect people the way I thought. It absorbed them, piece by piece, voice by voice, until nothing was left but the echo. And now, it had me. I crawled blindly, hands scraping against warped floorboards, until I found myself back in the hidden room behind the attic wall. The notebook still lay on the table, waiting, except it wasn't the same. The last page had changed. Where before the handwriting had ended in frantic scrawl, now there were fresh words etched deep into the paper, as though burned in. "You will write next," and beneath it, my name. I stared at my name carved into the final page of that notebook. It didn't look written, it looked etched, burned into the paper from the inside out. My breath came shallow, the whispers pressed harder, flooding the small room until it felt like I was drowning in voices. Write, continue, become us. The walls vibrated with them. The table rattled. The chair scraped an inch across the floor on its own. I stumbled backward, clutching the notebook to my chest as though I could squeeze answers out of it. That's when the air shifted, cold, heavy, as though something vast had leaned in close. And then, a single whisper rose above the rest, clear, sharp, unmistakable. It was my mother's voice. "Stay." I froze, my throat locked tight. My mother had been dead for years, but that was her. The exact lilt of her tone, the softness that followed the shape. "It's safe here," the voice added, coaxing. "No more loneliness, no more leaving." My knees gave out. I sank to the floor, tears stinging my eyes. For a heartbeat, just one, I wanted to believe it, to surrender. But then the chorus returned, twisting, overlapping, no longer just whispers but screams pressed through clenched teeth. Mine, ours, never leave. The walls buckled inward, dust rained from the ceiling. The hidden room shrank, tighter and tighter, until I could barely breathe. I bolted. The hallway was gone. In its place stretched an endless corridor of doors, each one identical, each one whispering as I passed. Voices clawed at me from every handle. Some begged, some screamed, some laughed. I didn't look in. I couldn't. At the far end, a single door glowed faintly, pale light spilling from its cracks. I sprinted, every step sinking deeper into the warped floor, as though the house itself were trying to swallow my legs whole. I slammed into the glowing door, flung it open, and found myself outside. The night air hit me like ice water. Stars overhead, the trees looming around the property, my car sitting in the driveway, exactly where I'd left it. For a moment, I was free. I ran for the car, fumbling the keys and shaking hands. I threw myself inside, jammed them into the ignition. The engine roared. The headlights cut across the house. It was smiling, not in any way a house should, but the angles of its windows, the tilt of its roofline, together they bent into a grotesque, grinning face. And in the beam of my headlights, I saw them, figures, dozens, pressed against the glass from the inside, pale, blurred, their hands flat, their mouths open in silent screams. And one of them looked exactly like me. I slammed my foot on the gas. The tires spun, gravel spitting, the car lurching forward, and then stopped, dead. The wheel wouldn't turn. The keys wouldn't budge. The dash lights flickered, sputtered, then went black. The reflection in the rearview mirror wasn't me. It was the other me, the one I'd seen in the bedroom, grinning wide, eyes hollow, lips moving without sound. And in that silence, the whispers surged one final time. "You're already inside." I blinked, and I was back in the house, sitting at the table in the hidden room, notebook open before me, pen in hand. The words scrawled across the page weren't mine, but my hand moved anyway, dragging ink in frantic strokes, sentences forming without my control. The walls whisper at night. They know my name. If you're reading this, it's already too late. My vision blurred, my body numb. The whispers weren't outside anymore. They weren't in the walls. They were in me. That was 3 nights ago. Or 3 years. Time doesn't move here the way it should. I can't tell anymore. All I know is the notebook is almost full. My story is nearly finished, and when the last page is written, I'll vanish into the walls like the rest. But someone will come. They always do. They'll hear the whispers. They'll find my words. And then it will be their turn. So, if you're still listening, tell me, where are you watching from? Because the house is listening too, and now, it knows your name.